Welcome back to Create Crucial Insight. I'm Blaine Gates, and welcome back to our fantastic workout space. Today is a really busy day, and there are people everywhere. So be prepared to hear some noises, just like the last time we were in the gym. So basically, in the past, we have been talking about the state styles checklist. And where did we go with the state styles checklist? So basically, the first day, we were talking about some of these things. All right, so in our first day, we were starting over here. So we started with nil. That is a situation where you need to wind down a certain type of work, or you need to think about beginning a certain type of work. Then the next one is here. The next one over is haphazard. So the middle one on the bottom is haphazard, and that is talking about when you just start out doing a new project and you don't have a process yet, then you might look like you're walking around a forest and you're blindfolded, bumping your head and also falling into holes, and then eventually you start to create different processes. And you can experiment with those processes. So you try process number 1. If it doesn't work, then you can try process number 2, number 3, number 4. And the whole point is that you want to get to your goal. You have some kind of goal that you're working on. Now, yesterday, I had the same picture, but I only explained these 3 squares. Everything is leading to eventually getting to this top place, which is following a process. Now, if you already have a process and it's not working, then you might want to consider experimenting with some new processes. And sometimes when you're experimenting with new processes, there can be aspects that feel like you're working haphazard. And then if there's some processes that are not working for you, you might want to end those processes. All right, so these are different work styles, and you can start to see how they work in a variety of different situations. Now today, we are going to talk about this top one, so following a process. Now, something also interesting from yesterday is we were able to look at how you can use these state styles, these various state styles, and put them into some of the other checklists. All right, so one of the interesting things about these checklists are that they intertwine with each other. Of course, we know that because when we started talking about these things, we were talking about 3 endeavor elements. The 3 endeavor elements tell us that we can shape our potential. All of us who are watching the video right now, you can shape potential. All you have to do is set your sights on some kind of goal and then create a plan to work toward that goal. And what do you use in order to work toward that goal? You use your potential and your plan. And then, of course, from there, we learned about state progress. And that breaks down each of these endeavor elements into 3 more elements. Now, what about like a process? So today we're talking about following a process. So where does that fit in this state progress, these 9 steps? So obviously, when you are forming your agendas, then eventually you're going to come up with some scenarios. Now, those various, like if you have a couple of different scenarios, that means that you might be in a situation where you will experiment with some of these processes. Now, once you choose a plan, possibly you're going to choose just one process. And if you're choosing just one process, it means what? It means when you move up from choosing a plan into the next step, which is performing the action. So in the top, when we have create effects, we have 3 different areas. We have perform action, recognize outcomes, and foster reuses. So when we are performing action, it means we are following a process. All right, so the state styles checklist, when we point to the theme, follow a process, it means perform action. Perform those actions in the process which you established when you chose the plan. And then by following the process, you will eventually achieve the outcome. Now, if you're going to experiment with processes, it means that you have more than one plan. First, you work on your first plan, you perform the action, then you get the outcome. That is one process. Number two, again, you choose the plan, whichever the second scenario, then you perform the action, and then you achieve the outcomes. That is following the process for the second, all right? So that's how it works with state progress. Now, remember that state progress also connects to some of the other checklists, all right? So when we're talking about shaping potential, there is one area called interactions, guiding interactions. All right, so guiding interactions, the first thing you think about is what? It's about synergies. Now, synergies, how can I think about synergies? Well, I want to serve my clients. Okay, so that could be a process. Maybe you're not serving your clients, so the style is nil. Remember from a few days ago. Maybe you're just starting out working with clients, and so now you're in haphazard. And maybe you have a couple of different clients, and you try a different process with each one. And eventually you find that one process is better than other processes. So then you have follow a process. All right, and it's the same thing if you want to aid your peers, which means you're going to help your enemies, your frenemies, and also the guys that you're working with. Also, when you want to help your providers, like what is the process that you use to help your providers? So of course, this is called, in the working with your potential area, then we're talking about like, how can we establish a process? And then when you start to build scenarios, then again, you're looking at how can we work with a process? And then eventually, you're going to choose a plan and perform those actions with your clients, with your peers, and with your providers. All right, so you can also look at inventiveness. All right, so the interesting thing about inventiveness, so if you go back to several videos ago, then you will find that we've already talked about the 9 different areas of inventiveness. And so following a process, like, okay, so if you're not being inventive at all, then okay, that's nil. If you're like, hey guys, we need to be inventive, let's put a pole in our foyer, in the front of our building. Let's put a slide in our building. Let's put some games in our building. All right, so this is more haphazard. And then eventually, why don't we should try to experiment with some processes. Now, of course, you can probably go online and find studies of different corporations who have done some studies about how to improve inventiveness within their company, and then you can compare those processes. And eventually, what do? You follow a process. Now, the other interesting idea is that instead of just like doing this random research online, you can actually follow a process which is already set out. You can follow the State Inventiveness checklist. The State Inventiveness checklist, what it is a process. And you can go through that process in order to increase your ability to innovate in your company. All right, also we talked about assumptions. So when we're talking about information, and when we do research, and when we try to figure things out, when we try to solve problems using information, which is going to help us to create some insight in order for us to make better decisions, then this is also like, eventually we want to create some kind of database. And then the database will be able to retrieve information, it will be able to process information, it'll be able to spit out information. So as you can see, what we're talking about here is we're talking about trying to create some kind of system. Like go back all the way to the times of Henry Ford. Now Henry Ford was looking around and he's like, I see you guys are making a car and you have one type of process. And then he decided to experiment with a new kind of process. And what did that create? It created this assembly line. Now, after he developed the assembly line, you had a set process, and he was able to pump out cars much quicker than other factories. Now, you fast forward to today, so over the years, these car companies have always been experimenting with processes, and then eventually they were able to select some kind of new robotics, some kind of new technology, and put that into their process. So you experiment with the process, and eventually you choose the best process. Now, these processes have created what? So the next thing that we had was like enhancements in software. So software is able to solve a lot of different processes that we were doing manually. And now we solve them with technology. Now, the interesting thing is the idea of following a process, all right? So think about two different words, the word routine and the word schedule. All right, so what's the first thing that, if you're listening to Jordan Peterson, what's the first thing he says? He says, follow a schedule. All right, so that's the first thing that you can do to kind of wake yourself up and get things going. Follow a schedule. And if you want to be more successful, as you listen to these motivational speakers, they say, follow a routine. Every day, you almost have to turn yourself into a robot. Like, what are the best systems that this earth have? Like, some of the best systems are actually these software systems, these computer systems, these robotic systems, because they follow a process. The output can be relied upon. It can be expected. We know what we're going to get. And some of the problems, I mean, the benefit with people, of course, is that you get new types of innovation and you have problem solving that sometimes computers can't do. But at the same time, with people, sometimes you get a breakdown. And we don't know why it's breaking down. Okay, maybe there's an emergency at home. Maybe there's an emotional problem. Maybe there's like all these different external influences that are going to affect the output. And so sometimes the best employees are the guys and gals who are able to create a process and follow that process. Like, I remember I was talking about Michael Phelps quite a few videos ago. And I listened to a talk about how he created his process. So he wakes up in the morning, he eats all these calories, he listens to a certain type of music, he goes through a certain routine, and he follows this process. And by following this process, he gets these incremental gains every single day. And that's the whole point, is that eventually you have to find a way to create a routine and put it on your schedule and follow that process so that you can get those incremental improvements every single day. Now, the last point that I wanted to cover is the idea of these direct outcomes checklists. All right, so what does it mean to have synergies? Like, what is the State Synergies checklist? It is a process to help you spot the opportunities for cooperation. What is the State Inventiveness checklist? It is a process to help you innovate. What is the State Progress checklist? It is a process to help you take your potential, create a plan, and achieve some results. And what is the State Assumptions checklist? It's a step-by-step process to help you to point out the information that you need, go and search for it, figure out if it's the right kind of quality, make sure that it's on point, figure out what's the insight we can derive from it, and make sure that you understand the risk and the benefit from using that information. All right, all of these checklists are actually processes. So if you follow a process, you can evolve your plans with a framework set by these checklists. That's the whole point. So like today is actually the heart. I mean, we're at day 42, which is kind of in the middle of the 101 days. It's very close. But this is the idea, this is the very center of all of the things that we're doing. It's that we follow processes so that we can achieve better results. So I invite you today to take out a pencil, take out a piece of paper, write down your process. All right? You can write down a schedule. You can write down your routine. You can create, remember we had the Jerry Seinfeld, where you're writing down the things that you're going to do every day. And then you're going to create a recipe for how you're going to do each of those things. Break it down into micro-routines. All right? Create those routines. Make sure everybody understands the standard operating procedures. And then you can anticipate the results. Thank you for tuning into Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates.